I'm Victoria Walker. I'm an attorney in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. I work for the federal government full time. That's like my 9 to 5 job. And I also teach at George Mason University Law School in the legal writing program. And so, yeah, that's basically me. I love business. I love blockchain. And yeah, happy to be here, I guess.
Thank you, Victoria.
No
All right,
problem.
so I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
And the first question is, how or why did you get into the blockchain space?
Okay, so anybody that knows me knows that I'm like a really big podcast listener. That is probably the number one form of media that I consume. And so back in, I want to say 2016, early 2017, one of the podcasts I listened to regularly, the host constantly talked about Bitcoin, constantly talked about, new cryptocurrency projects. And he mentioned it enough times that I was like, let me just Google this and see, what it is that he's talking about. And from there, I sort of fell down the rabbit hole, if you will, and learned a lot about other cryptocurrency projects, right? And back in 2017, everyone was trying to get rich and not necessarily interested in the underlying technology. But I read a few books about blockchain and its potential to sort of disrupt a number of very old, sort of archaic industries, and I was hooked. And so it started with podcasts, and I'm still at it 4 years later. So yeah, that's how I got started.
Awesome, awesome. I think you're the first person that's been able to be introduced to blockchain through a podcast. And I think that's great that even at that time, you were able to find it and then pay attention enough to say, you know what, there's something interesting about this. And I'm seeing that the running theme for us Black women is we don't automatically latch on to the cryptocurrency aspect of it, but we want to understand the technology. Like, what is it, And
Right.
so it piques our interest, but then we go deeper and do our own due diligence before we fully dip our toe into the space.
Yeah, it's funny. It took me a while. This particular podcast host, right? Every episode, he was like, oh, if you want to sign up for my service, you can. It's this much money, but I'm also accepting Bitcoin. And then there was a particular project, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, right? But they actually sponsored ads on the podcast. And so I just kept hearing about it. And I looked into it, found myself in a group chat with other people who they were really into like heavy crypto trading. And I tried that, and that wasn't for me, but I really was, convinced about the potential for the technology.
Okay. So what does blockchain mean to you?
So I would say I sort of look at it, from the concrete perspective and then also from the abstract, right? So I'm not, a tech person, right? But in terms of the concrete meaning of it to me, like I really look at blockchain as, being a tool, if you will, a technology that really has the potential to improve efficiencies and securities and transparency and privacy, right? Across, really any facet of life that we currently have that's touched by technology. And then when I think about it in like the abstract, everybody says it's disruptive, and that's, the word that comes to mind for me immediately, is just its potential to really change the way we do things in certain industries, and especially those industries that have lots of barriers to entry, if you will, so finance, real estate, et cetera, right? I really think about blockchain as a tool to minimize or, in some instances, even completely eliminate some of those barriers. And so, so concrete tech, efficiency, privacy, security, but, sort of the bigger picture, looking at it as a way to really change the way many of us go about doing things and getting access to opportunities that we wouldn't otherwise have.
Okay, that's good. As an attorney, I'm sure you're very familiar with Ethereum smart contract, and because a lot of people seem to, I guess, compare the two.
Okay.
So what's your take, and how do you see Ethereum being beneficial to your line of work?
So I don't actually compare the two, right? So I think of smart contracts as just like a really cool name for, calling what happens when you have these automated, transactions that happen when conditions are met. And so, sure, that's a contract, right? And I think that is analogous to contracts in the real world. But ultimately, it's just code, right? And so, you could say that ultimately a contract is just a piece of paper, right? Contracts are invalidated in the real world all the time for a host of reasons. And so I think that, the code is one thing, and what a contract is in the eyes of the law is a different thing. And I don't think that the differences that pop up between smart contracts and paper contracts will play out that much differently in the law, if that makes sense. And so that's how I think of the two. So yeah.
Okay.
What was the part of the question? Sorry, I forgot.
Let me ask you the last question, and I'll come back to that. How do you see blockchain improving the Black community / African diaspora?
Yeah, so I think that blockchain, and this kind of goes back to my previous answer, right, I really do think that it has the opportunity to eliminate or at least significantly minimize a number of barriers, right? And so I think that one of the things that, Black people in the diaspora, whether, they have families still living on the continent or not, right, is I think that access and connectivity is a really big challenge, right? Especially for people who don't have families still on the continent or family that they know of anyways, right? And so I think that blockchain has the potential to really connect people and to allow us to pool our resources, right? To leverage those resources for projects, whether they be in, Black communities in the US, in the UK, somewhere in South America, or, somewhere on the continent. I think that it has the potential to allow us to connect, to collaborate, to really pool our resources together and put them to work for the benefit of Black communities. And so that's probably the biggest, I think the biggest benefit or the biggest potential benefit or advantage when it comes to blockchain and the global Black community.
Yeah, that I 100% agree with that. There's this movement within the space, right? That feels like someone mentioned it as, they describe it as a village. And because we're able to connect with each other. And that's what blockchain has really, and that's why I fell in love with it, because I'm like, that ability to connect with people across the globe, and there wasn't any barrier, right?
Yeah.
And the only thing that linked us was really the love of the technology, the use cases that could be brought forth based on this technology. And so we're able to, connect with various people within this industry. As a person that first came into this industry, what was your take? Because I know it's really kind of like a weird space a little, because you're like, wow, this is not like, everyday life,
Right.
And you get swept into it, and then so many things happen. Like you said, you get swept into the trading aspect, and you realize, wow, these people are really out there, and then you kind of sit, because that's what happened to me too, because I was in a Telegram group where there was this guy who was like literally telling you, get into this ICO, get into this, and you get into it, but I'm like, but like, what else do we need to do? Like, and everybody's just like, just follow the flow. Don't ask questions, just follow the flow.
That's just not how some of us are built, right? Some of us have a lot of questions. And so I think that's kind of where, where I think those of us who sort of are looking at blockchain and its potential, outside of the currency aspect, right, outside of that token realm, I think that's where a lot of us sort of found our home, if you will, right? It's like, I have a lot of questions. You're telling me that you want me to pay US dollars for this thing that don't have no product. You ain't testing nothing, you don't have a market. Like, I just need some more information. I mean, so I think that I realized that wasn't for me. But I think the other thing, right, about blockchain and the Black global communities, I think the other part of it, in addition to the connectivity part of it, is that blockchain is still like such a young technology, and there's still so much potential for growth and for adoption. And so, when I think back to I was a child, so I don't really remember the tech boom and the internet and all that stuff all that much, but right, that there are lots of people who made their bones, who made their first million or made their first whatever, in the early days of the rollout of that technology. And so I think about blockchain and I think about, Black people in blockchain, I also think about like, who do we have that's going to be Bill Gates, right? Who's going to be our Steve Jobs? Who's going to be, our Jeff Bezos? And so I think that there's a potential for, for people who, are on the tech side or not on the tech side, or on the business side, on the legal side, to really sort of make a name for themselves as well with the technology. So that's another thing that I think about.
No, that's very true. Very true. And the ladies have all said this technology, just like you said, is new. This is the great time to get into. I know people pay attention to Bitcoin and they're thinking, well, 50 something $1,000 is not new,
Right.
but that's different. That's like a different use case,
Yeah,
the technology itself is very much new. And I was speaking to Talisha, and she mentioned how, we went through the different phases of the World Wide Web, how, you had Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and then 3.0. And she believes that we're in blockchain 2.0. We haven't fully realized the 2.0, but we're going towards 3.0. And, that's something that we as a community need to grasp, right? People made a lot of money. I think you said this, and with the web, World Wide Web, people made money just creating a page and just selling off like segments of the page just to market.
You're talking about, I think about like eBay, right? It's like, their founders became uber rich selling, like helping people sell their stuff. Like,
yes.
And so it may feel sort of, I think that people, when they think about, like blockchain and the potential, like you need to do something that's like totally out of this world. And it's like, if you can find a really cool way to do the same thing differently, right? So maybe, I don't know, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, and I don't want to like ramble on, but I think that people think that you have to have like these really sort of like pie in the sky, Elon Musk type ideas in order for your technology to be successful, or for your business idea to be successful. And that's just not the case, right? It's really the most sort of like rudimentary things, the things that are filling needs that we have in our everyday lives that end up being the most successful. And so it's like, I have these everyday problems, are any of these things, able to be improved upon or, changed and made something different with blockchain, right? And so that's kind of how I think about it. But yeah, I definitely, in terms of like, the phases of the internet and blockchain and all that, like Talisha is brilliant, and so I obviously totally agree with everything she said.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, she is. She has a wealth of information. And she was one of the early adapters and saw the vision of the need for everybody to be included into this and at least understand the basics of the technology, not necessarily getting down into the deep dive.
Right.
And it's true, because we're seeing a lot of companies now who are coming up with their own concept of either cryptocurrency usage or blockchain. And so that knowledge is going to be required in your resume. That knowledge is going to be required everywhere,
Right.
And if we're in blockchain 2.0 and we haven't fully realized that, we're going to get to a point where blockchain is just a common household name.
1,000%. Which, that's ultimately the goal. We just hope that there are enough, Black and brown people that are also sort of, helping to push that, right? Who are behind that drive to make it a household name. And so, especially Black women, I feel like I see more Black women in blockchain than I do, any other demographic of person of color, right? So men, other women of color. I think that, I hope that, there's that the next, Mark Zuckerberg or whoever is a Black woman, right?
Yes,
we're there.
We need that.
Yeah, we do. And I feel like I see enough of us right there that I think that that's a real possibility.
Yes. All right. I do have one more question for you. Every time we tell people about blockchain and cryptocurrency, we get pushback about the fact that they're not technical. And with you're coming from a legal background. Does the technical aspect concern you at all?
So yes and no, right? So it depends on what I'm doing, right? So I have currently 2 sort of blockchain projects that I am sort of driving, right? They're my projects. And I do find that while I have some technical know-how, right, in terms of blockchain, I can't get on nobody's platform and code a single thing, right? Like that's not necessarily my wheelhouse. And so sometimes it's intimidating to think about, a project that I want to do that I'm the person who's driving it, right? And I'm not just someone consulting, I'm not providing, a legal lens, or I'm not thinking about it from a policy perspective, right? But it really is, here's a problem and I want to use blockchain to solve it. It can be a challenge, right? To mentally get past that. But I always go back to, I wish I remember who told me, right? I might have been, I spoke to a lot of people about this particular idea last year, right? But basically it's like, it doesn't matter how much I stress about it. Like I'm never going to know enough about the tech side I can't code, I can't develop an entire app. I can't develop, an entire network or an entire system. And so I can't let, my what I feel is a deficient knowledge sort of keep me from pursuing whatever project I want to pursue, right? The important thing is to align with people who have that know-how, right? And to know when I have a weakness and to bring someone else in to sort of bolster that area of weakness. And so it definitely can be a challenge mentally, but I think that a good idea is a good idea. And if you can sell it the right way to the right people and get the right people on your side, that it doesn't matter, right? Like as long as you have someone there who can answer those tech questions, who can build out that framework, who can tell you what risks you have in terms of security or privacy or what have you, that I never feel like my personal lack of, at least a thorough understanding of the technology is a challenge. It just depends.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah. This industry or space does need everyone.
Yeah.
You don't have to come with the technical background, just your experience as you know it, because all industries will eventually find a use case for blockchain. So it's very important. And, as an attorney, to go back to the smart contract, not as an attorney, are you seeing more attorneys start looking at how to use, or law firms use the smart contract aspect of blockchain?
So not really, not that I have seen, right? I think that a lot of the law firms and just practitioners in general are really trying to wrap their heads around, sort of what happens after the technology doesn't work out the way someone thinks it'll work out, right? So looking more so at the disputes, right? In the areas where potential disputes or disagreements or conflicts can arise. I do know, I've heard some talk of, individuals who advise, right, either broker dealers or other sort of financial entities who are interested in either, rolling out their own coins or, developing some sort of blockchain-based framework for exchanging different types of assets, right? And so that's obviously not then necessarily using the technology, but sort of advising on the risks and things of that nature that come along with it. But I don't really know of anyone who is really specialized in, sort of smart contracts and really leveraging the technology to facilitate transactions, if that makes any sense. It's more so like the troubleshooting, the risk assessment, compliance, and things of that nature. Okay. But I'm certain that there's someone out there who probably has, in their banner on their website, we do smart contracts. And so I'm sure it's out there, right? I'm certain of it. I know a ton of lawyers, who are really interested in blockchain. There's actually, I think, there's a global legal blockchain consortium. And so it's a group of, different legal service providers, attorneys, and other, sort of ancillary service providers who are all, looking at ways that we can leverage the technology to improve access to justice, and like the provision of legal services, and making, bringing down some of those expenses and making things more efficient. And so I guess from that perspective, there are people in the profession who are looking at it, not necessarily just smart contracts, right? But how can we use blockchain to make what we do better for the people we do it for? So yeah, so I guess that's sort of like a long roundabout way of saying not necessarily smart contracts, but there are lawyers who are definitely using blockchain.
Okay, all right. So we're nearing the end of the segment. I want you to plug your projects. If it's too early to plug, then I understand.
Never too early.
But your social media handle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my social media handles, I am Mad Maven on both Instagram and Twitter. So it's Mad because I always have a rant, even though I've pulled back lately.
He talks about good shows.
Don't get me started on good shows. All I watch is trashy TV. I can tell you all about the trashy TV, but yeah, Mad Maven on Instagram and Twitter. Victoria Walker, I think I'm number 5 on LinkedIn. And in terms of projects, I am working on a sort of electronic health record keeping app that will hopefully deploy blockchain. And then I am also working to tokenize a friend's book that she has coming out. And so, yeah, those are my 2 projects. And then I also have a blog that I occasionally, maybe more so infrequently than I'd like to, but occasionally write at, and that's blockchain blog, BLAWG.com.